Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Jim Tobin, who's the president of Ignite Social Media and author of a fascinating book called Earn It, Don't Buy It, the CMO's Guide to Social Media Marketing in a Post-Facebook World. Jim, are we really in a post-Facebook world?
Well, not quite. I think the people at Facebook making their $6 or $7 billion right now would perhaps suggest I'm premature with that assessment.
All right.
But I think we are in a place where Facebook is showing signs of creaking. I think everybody could agree with that.
So what is it that people should be looking at then in the world of social media?
Well, what the main point of a post-Facebook world is there was a period that lasted for about 18 months to 2 years where you could reach literally every demographic effectively on Facebook. We waited a while for the older generation to get on Facebook, and shortly after they got there, the younger people left. My children don't go on Facebook hardly ever. They're 15 and 13, and they use things like Snapchat, and they use Twitter a lot, and they use Instagram, but they're really spreading out. And so what I think we're beginning to see is a fragmentation in the social media world, where to really reach a complete range of demographics, you're going to need to rely on more than just Facebook.
So let's talk about from a business standpoint, because in my day job is that I'm an investment advisor. I do financial planning for people, and we're often talking in our marketing meetings about what's the best way to connect with our audience. And probably every few months when we have one of these meetings, someone says, yeah, but there's now this new thing, and people are doing this and people are doing that. It's impossible for any company to keep up. Is it better to try and constantly keep up, or just to kind of stick with what you know?
The main thing is to set your strategy, because your strategy shouldn't change. What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to know if you've accomplished it? Whether that's in building your brand reputation, driving traffic to your website, whatever it is. If you set those things, it's easier to filter these new tools within those within the parameters of your strategy. So you may hear about Snapchat and Pinterest, and if you're a company making a lot of consumer products, should you be on Snapchat or Pinterest? Well, we're going to measure success by driving traffic to our website. Well, that suggests Pinterest, where you can pin content from your website, where people are on Pinterest to look for inspiration on products to buy, crafts to make, those sort of things, would be much more effective than Snapchat, which is a way of sending a message from one person to another, or one person to a small group that then disappears. So if you know what you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to be successful, some of the noise sort of filters itself out for you. The other factor is, has it gotten big enough to worry about? Somebody's always going to be doing something neat on Snapchat or Tumblr or Pinterest or Instagram or WhatsApp, or what the latest news of the day is, and that's fine for them to experiment. For most of us, we don't need to experiment on everything. We need to keep our head up as to what we're trying to do, and when things get to a certain maturity, maybe they factor into our plans.
It sounds almost like in the pre-internet world, people would, or companies would, try to decide where to advertise. And they would say, well, should I advertise on the radio or on TV? Or if I'm going to advertise on TV, which show or in which magazine should I place my ad? It seems to be getting to that level of fragmentation. Is that a good parallel?
It is a good parallel, and it's extremely difficult to reach people, in part because the internet and social media aren't really well built for interrupting people. Television is with preset commercials, radio is with commercials. So, but social, in a lot of platforms, you have to opt in to follow someone on Twitter, or opt in to mostly follow them on Facebook. You can buy some ads, but it's challenging, and so the level of scrutiny of where to place your investment, particularly if you're trying to get organic, what I call organic or earned coverage, meaning you do something interesting enough that people talk about it themselves, you really need to make sure you do enough on a particular channel or down a particular path that you give it time to be noticed.
There are some companies that are exceptionally strong at presenting their message, and they've been that way forever. And there's some companies that are, weak in that area. And you talk a lot in your book about this whole concept of messaging. In fact, in your book, you say the medium is not the message is the message. If, as an investor or an investment advisor, how can I find companies who really are able to create the message and sustain it over the long term?
find companies to work with you, or find companies that are just good at that?
Well, just companies that are good at it that, we would want to invest in.
Sure. So, Red Bull does a fantastic job of getting attention in social media, and that's because they realize what they're selling. So, sort of like Coke years ago realized they're not selling sugar water, Red Bull's selling adventure. And because they know that, because they understand it, they do a fantastic job of coming up with adventurous things to associate with, the most famous being the jump from space. But it goes to a lot of other brands. Our first real client back in 2007 was Nature Made, the large vitamin company in the United States. And we had to figure out why anyone would care about a vitamin company. You don't tweet, took my vitamin C again today, didn't die. So why would you follow or friend or care about content from a vitamin company? And when we looked at a higher level, we realized that these people spend an extra $2 per bottle over the house brand. And why do they do that? Well, they care about healthy living. They care about the quality they present with their family. And if we could talk about family and health and diet and getting the most out of life by being active, that was good brand building for Nature Made, and it appealed to the same people willing to spend the extra $2 a bottle to get that quality.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Jim Tobin, who's the president of Ignite Social Media, and he's also the author of the book Earn It, Don't Buy It, which the title is really all about how people can earn the trust of their market through social media without having to go out and actually advertise for things. Jim, what do you see as the direction that social media is going now?
Well, a lot of it is going to shifting toward paid. So Facebook made $6 billion last year. Twitter's supposed to make $1 billion this year. And, their click-through rates are deplorable. They're worse than banner ads. And, they promised us all that their ads would do better because they would know us so well that they would serve up ads that were, better. And they just don't. They just don't. But 99.96% of people don't click on these ads, but we give them more and more money. And it's not that we should never advertise on Facebook. It's that we should put much more of our money into figuring out who cares about our vitamin company or our energy drink or whatever the brand is, and how do we get them excited about the space that we're in, and how do we accrue brand value to that? Because the research we have with our clients shows that if somebody sees the content we call organically, other people call earned media, meaning we didn't pay for it to get exposed to them, they take measurably better shopping actions than people who saw the same content promoted to them. So they're more likely to visit a website, 3 times more likely to visit a website if they see it organically than if they see it paid. They visit 3 times more pages if they see it organically than if they visit after seeing a paid update. And they're much more likely to search in Google or Bing for those companies' search terms.
So when you say to find a company organically, do you simply mean finding that in a Google search or a Bing search?
No, finding content that we've created in your Facebook feed, or finding an influencer that we're working with writing a column about our product, or your friend enters a contest and tells you about the brand as a result. Those sort of ways of getting people to market for you, to talk about you, to opt in to receiving your updates without you having to pay for them. Those sorts of exposures really do get people interested in buying. And let me give you a quick example of that and why it's so logical to me. Beyonce released her album that no one knows she was doing at midnight on a Tuesday or something, and just announced in a little update on social media that she had this surprise new album that was out. That is all she did. She did not spend a nickel on advertising, and it spread like wildfire. She became the #1 selling album. That's totally logical to me, because if you hear this, you, the customer, feel like you discovered Beyonce has a secret album. That you have to tell people about. Hey, I just heard Beyonce has a secret album. If that ad comes in front of you, you may be interested in it. Maybe you'll even buy the album, but you're not going to tell everybody because there's an ad telling everybody. So you didn't discover it. So the momentum goes away. And it's the same thing we're doing over and over again to get people excited to voluntarily talk about our product, our brand, our industry.
So if we're talking, Beyonce is a such a huge brand already, at the Coca-Cola and Nike level, that I would expect that if she were to tweet something, it would get picked up instantly. But for smaller companies, one of the things that people often hear is that the way the internet is going today is that content is king. And if you just produce a lot of quality content, the search engines are really trying to develop algorithms to help the good content float to the top and get found more easily. Do you think that's true, or is it really ultimately about trying to manipulate these social media networks?
No, I think it's true as far as it goes. One of the challenges in thinking about it as only content is that people get their blinders on and they don't try to activate their fan bases. And so there's no point of having fans and followers if you can't activate them. And that might mean as simple as reading your content. It might mean sharing your content, liking it, commenting. But it also means getting them to your website. It also means getting them to maybe sign up for your email, get them to buy something. Those are the things we need to do. And if we only try to produce really interesting content, we're missing out on the other part, which is how can we get our followers to market for us? That's something that people have to think about as well. Now, great content often spreads, but if we just think about the content and not how or why would somebody share it, we miss out on a big portion of social media marketing.
Okay, so in the last minute or two, if you were giving advice to a small to medium-sized company that's trying to make its way in the social media world today, having to make a decision where to really plant some seeds, where do you think you would advise?
I would start with how do you sell? And to whom? So we started this company with 3 people. We have about 110 now. And we knew that to buy a social media agency, to hire a social media agency, you will do a search on Google 99% of the time. And so we don't have a fantastic Facebook page. Even though we do this for a living for big brands, we have a fantastic blog and we have incredible search engine optimization because of that blog. And so focusing on how is somebody going to find me when they're in a buying mood, and what can I do to amplify that is the best way to narrow down all these hundreds of things you can do to the things you need to do to make more money.
Okay, so the first question you're saying, in other words, when people are listening to this who are planning to get into the social media world, is to try to think about their ultimate client, what the client is going to do when he needs to find my business, and then that's the place to set up shop?
That's the place to start, yeah, and then building your brand. If you're in the space of a financial planner, I mean, there's a lot of personal branding involved, and so the production of content or promotions or materials to drive traffic into a website, for example, is part one. But then the people who come to that website have to sort of conclude that you're the real deal. You're a quality thought leader in this space, and so it's not just tricks that a lot of companies are using, 12 ways to build your portfolio, but the article's really bad. That wouldn't behoove somebody in a financial planning space because you have to win that, not just that traffic, but you have to win the credibility along the way.
Mm-hmm. I guess that is very important. Jim, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, tell us, how can people follow your work?
Well, if you're interested, you can go to ignitesocialmedia.com and take a look there, or follow us on Twitter at IgniteSMA.
All right, and we'll put links to those at the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. Jim Tobin, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure, thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.